we are going to be talking about some of the new technologies we have implemented in our products to enhance automation. And so today's agenda, we're going to start with the basics, the tool libraries, how you set up tool libraries, and that's one level of automation. And then use of default parameters, how you can effectively use default parameters to implement automation as well. And then we're going to be talking about automatic toolpath creation using knowledge bases. This is stepping it up a little bit to use knowledge bases and the process information in your shop floor and using that, encoding or embedding it in knowledge bases, and then using that for repeatable and automated CAM process. And then we'll also go a little bit into talking about how to select geometry in knowledge bases. Initially we'll just show you how the knowledge bases work, and then we'll talk about how we can actually select geometry into knowledge bases for control of machining. And then we're going to be talking about the SDK, or the software development kit from RhinoCAM. And then finally, we're going to be touch upon the Grasshopper, how you can use Grasshopper in CAM automation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe Anand, and I'm the product manager here. And I'll be joined today by Don Lacoris, who's our senior application engineer and support manager. And what he's going to be doing, we're going to be doing a little bit different kind of webinar today. Don is going to be showing the first 4 topics, and then we're going to switch it over to me, and I'll be showing more of the programming part of this webinar. So a little housekeeping tips, so you don't have that. Anyway, so we normally like to keep this interactive. And you will see that chat window where you can add your questions in as we are progressing, and one of us will be watching those questions, and we will answer as we interactively. And if we need to stop the other person doing the demonstration, we can do that as well. And then if we don't get to your questions, we'll always answer it by email. And then as usual, we'll get the webinar recording sent out to all the registrants. All right, so without any further delay, go ahead, Don.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me okay. As Joe mentioned, we're talking about CAM automation. This is always an exciting topic to talk about because it saves you a lot of time in your machining process. I have the tool library automation slide up, but I want to step it back just 1 second and talk about template files, which I don't have a slide for, but I just wanted to mention it. You may know already, if you're familiar with Rhino, and the same is VisualCAD, is you can create a file and save it as a template file. And you'll find that in your files menu in both Rhino and VisualCAD CAM. Basically what that does is just any geometry, any layers that you want to have displayed. A lot of users actually have a base file that has like their scoreboard or a fixture that you always have on your scoreboard. They work that into their template file, so every time they create a new project, it's there. So that's just one base of one level of automation you can do without RhinoCAM or VisualCAD. Okay, with that said, we're going to be going a little bit slower than we normally do and see if we can get all this stuff in so that we can get this cohesive workflow through here. Okay, so we're going to talk about tool library automation. This, as you know, if you're obviously already working with RhinoCAM, VisualCAD CAM, you can create tools and you can save those tools. You most likely know that you can save a tool library. But what I have on the screen here is, if I start on the left, I'm just going to name the dialogues and I'll go into a little bit more detail. On the far left, you see what we call the machining objects browser. It has 4 tabs: a tools tab, regions, features, K-bases. This is typically located at the bottom left corner of your Rhino display in the RhinoCAM machining browser. This is the bottom portion. And Here's where you can load your tool library in here, and we're going to talk about this toolbar up here at the top in a little bit more detail. When you create a tool, obviously you use this dialog in the middle to define all your tool parameters. And what I want to mention here, the reason one of the reasons that we're talking about tools is that you can embed a lot of knowledge into your tools without really doing a whole lot of work, not a lot of setup or anything. When you define your tool, you're obviously going to set your tool dimensions, and you can set your feeds and speeds and the properties of the tool and some other options here. This knowledge gets saved with that tool based on the tool name, okay? So you can embed all this knowledge that you need for a certain tool when you use that tool, and then you can carry that knowledge over into your operations when you load that tool. And then on the far right, we have some cutting tool preferences where you can set some cutting tool colors, the display, and then your library preferences, what tool library you want to load when you start. Let's go to the next screen here. Now let's talk a little bit about, we're going to go over this in actual demo in RhinoCAM. So we're just showing you the slides right now. So using default parameters, as soon as you install RhinoCAM or VisualCAD CAM, it comes with factory set parameters. So if you just load RhinoCAM, load a part, and just create an operation and regenerate, in most cases in 3-axis, it'll just it'll analyze the part in the stock, grab the default parameters, and create a toolpath. And a lot of users do that just to get a toolpath on the part so you can look at it and then tweak it from there. You can save, as you define your parameters in an operation, you can save those out to a default knowledge base. And we'll show you how to do that and where that knowledge base is set. So on the far left, you see the Save as Defaults menu in the machining job. And then you see the Preferences dialog in the middle, where you can set your default knowledge base for default parameters. And then on the far right, you just see some other interface preferences that can affect how default parameters are loaded when you open or save files. And Joe, if I missed something here, just feel free to hop in. So knowledge bases in 3-axis. What you see right here is a progression of three files. If we look in the top left corner, we have a starting part that we're going to program with a roughing operation and a parallel finishing operation, and we're going to save that out to a knowledge base. And then we're going to load 2 other files and apply that knowledge base and have those toolpaths generate automatically. This is something that you can do in 3-axis that will totally automate your toolpaths, because in 3-axis, you don't have to select any control geometry. If you don't select control geometry, it'll calculate the toolpaths based on the part geometry and the stock geometry. You do have to have the stock defined, by the way, to completely automate it in 3-axis. So we're going to show you that, and then we're going to actually load that knowledge base and show you how to edit it and how that works as far as dragging and dropping operations from the knowledge base up into your machining job, etc. This is all in 3-axis. Now, in 2-axis, it's required that you make a selection of control geometry in 2-axis, because in 2-axis, it doesn't know that there's a part model per se. But you don't even really have to set your stock in 2-axis. But if you want to, obviously, if you want to simulate it, you got to have your stock. But in 2.5-axis knowledge bases, at the base level, if you want to implement a knowledge base in 2-axis, you do have to select some geometry for each of those operations. We're going to show you a fast way to select geometry when you use a knowledge base. And then we're going to bump it up a level in 2.5-axis and show you how you can automate the selection of geometry in 2.5 axis. So you can completely automate your 2.5 axis operations, similar to how you do in 3 axis, with automatically selecting your geometry based on layers or colors of geometry, etc. And then, like I mentioned in this slide here, we've already set our selection rules, and we're just dragging and dropping operations up into the machining job and generating them to automatically come up with a toolpath. If there's any questions, feel free to add them in the questions panel, and we're monitoring them in the background. So here is where Joe's going to take over in the last 2 topics. You want to talk about these, Joe?
Yeah, I can do that. The end of the webinar, we're going to be talking about the SDK and the Grasshopper components, as we said earlier. A little bit about the SDK. For those of you who don't know what an SDK means, it stands for Software Development Kit. So what that means is we bundle this software development kit along with RhinoCAM, and that basically is an interface to your programs, any programs that you write, that you can leverage our RhinoCAM functionality, and that's what the SDK allows you to do. And you can see the graphic on the right side that shows the different components that you need in order to leverage the SDK that's bundled with RhinoCAM. Obviously, you need Rhino, and of course the RhinoCAM plugin and the RhinoCAM SDK, which is actually built into RhinoCAM, so you don't need anything special. Once you install RhinoCAM, you're going to be able to immediately start using the SDK. And then, of course, you need the Python or C# program or .NET C# programs to actually write programs and use the SDK functionality to drive CAM. So the second bullet item here says, yeah, you can use the SDK to create programs to automate CAM, and we'll see what kind of programs you can create later on in the demonstration. And we offered 2 kinds of programming interfaces. One, you can use Python, which is actually, for those of you who don't know what Python is a very popular and an easy to learn language that's very popular these days, and I think in the Rhino world that's used a lot in a lot of different areas, and so that we chose to use Python as one interface, the Python interface as one. And then we also have a .NET interface where for more advanced programmers, you can use the C# language from Microsoft and use the Visual Studio tools to create programs. And anything you can do in Python, you can do in .NET and vice versa. So they're kind of mirror images of each. So depending on what you're comfortable with, you can use either one of those interfaces. The SDK itself needs Rhino, obviously, like that graphic talks about. RhinoCAM 2023 should be installed, and of course you need to have a RhinoCAM 2023 license and as well as Rhino license to run the SDK. SDK is installed with the RhinoCAM, so you don't have to do anything extra. Once you install RhinoCAM 2023, the SDK will install. And the little graphic on the left side, the bottom left, shows the path name. A path where it's going to be installed is actually going to be in the program files, Rhino 7 under plugins. I'll talk a little bit about that when we jump into the demo. And then, to use this, the user would need expertise in programming. So this is not for the faint-hearted. You can't jump in real easily unless you know Python or say .NET, especially .NET. Unless you're familiar with that, this won't be your cup of tea. So this is for advanced users or companies that have the expertise in-house that they can leverage this. But the power, of course, with the power, you have a lot of nice features that you can implement and automate your entire process in the shop floor. And we have companies doing that today. We have a large company in Japan who's taken saw machining, and they're doing all kinds of automated saw machining for lumber. And we have many instances here in the U.S. as well that are using the SDK in different varying levels. All right, Don, next slide, please. Then we will talk about Grasshopper. For those of you who are not familiar with Grasshopper, Grasshopper is a Rhino plugin that is installed with Rhino 6 or 7. And by the way, the RhinoCAM SDK works also with the Rhino 6 or 7. Grasshopper is a plugin that's built into Rhino and is installed with Rhino 6 or 7. And what Grasshopper is, it provides the parametric design capabilities in Rhino using a visual programming user interface. So what that means is you can actually, instead of actually programming something, the logic of your program, you can do visual programming. It makes programming a little bit easier. And since there are built-in components that you can drag and drop, a lot of those tasks, the programming tasks, can potentially be fully automated using Grasshopper. And then, and it's really, when you're getting into families of parts and things of that nature, let's say you're machining or creating panels, that might be an area where Grasshopper can come in very handy. So you're just changing a parameter here, and then it creates new designs. And then on top of that, using the Grasshopper components that leverage our RhinoCAM SDK, you can actually end up with parametric machining depending on how your design process is set up. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're not won't get too much into that depth, but we will talk a little bit about that in our demo. So, all right, Don.
Okay, we're ready to start the demo. Let's go ahead and I'm going to switch over to RhinoCAM.